My mother-in-law wanted to humiliate me with a fake allergy test, so I exposed her devious plan, and planned a real wedding without her. I never thought the happiest day of my life would become the day I almost died, and the person who tried to kill me would be my future mother-in-law. My name is Amelia Carter, and I'm a 29-year-old interior designer who thought I had everything figured out. I was marrying the love of my life, David, after 3 years of what I believed was a perfect relationship. The only dark cloud on our horizon was his mother, Lorraine Carter, a 61-year-old retired elementary school teacher, who had made it crystal clear from day one that I wasn't good enough for her precious son. From our first meeting, Lorraine had this way of looking at me like I was something unpleasant she'd stepped in. She'd make little comments about my career, suggesting that playing with pretty colors and fabrics wasn't a real job. She'd reminisce constantly about David's ex-girlfriend Jessica, who was apparently a doctor and such a lovely, accomplished girl. Every family dinner felt like a battlefield where I was fighting for my right to exist in David's life. But I tolerated it all because David was worth it. He'd squeeze my hand under the table when his mother got particularly cutting, and later he'd apologize profusely for her behavior. "She just needs time to warm up to you," he'd say. "She's protective because I'm her only child." I believed him because I wanted to believe him. The one thing I was absolutely clear about with David's family was my severe allergy to tree nuts, particularly walnuts. This wasn't some trendy dietary restriction or attention-seeking behavior. This was a legitimate medical condition that could kill me. I'd had my first major reaction when I was 12, and it had been terrifying enough that I carried an EpiPen everywhere and was obsessively careful about reading ingredient labels. I'd explained this to Lorraine multiple times, especially as our wedding approached. "I can't even be around walnut dust," I'd told her during one family dinner. "My throat closes up, I break out in hives, and I need immediate medical attention. It's not something to mess around with." Lorraine had given me that tight-lipped smile she reserved for when she thought I was being dramatic. "Oh yes, so many young people have allergies these days. When I was teaching, we never had to deal with all these special requirements." David had jumped in immediately. "Mom, this is serious. Amelia ended up in the hospital last year because of cross-contamination at a restaurant." "Of course," Lorraine had said, her voice dripping with barely concealed skepticism. "I'm sure it's very serious." When wedding planning began, Lorraine surprised everyone by volunteering to help with the catering. She offered to make several appetizers and side dishes, insisting it would be her contribution to making the day special. David was thrilled that his mother was finally showing interest in our wedding, and I cautiously hoped this might be the olive branch I'd been waiting for. Lorraine asked detailed questions about the menu, taking notes in her neat teacher's handwriting. She asked about my allergies again, but this time her questions seemed different. Instead of the usual dismissive tone, she wanted specifics. "What exactly happens when you have a reaction? How quickly does it start? How can you tell if there are nuts in something, if they're chopped very finely?" At the time, I thought she was finally taking my condition seriously. I explained everything carefully, grateful that she seemed to care. "Usually I can taste even tiny amounts," I told her. "But if nuts are ground up very finely and mixed into something with strong flavors, it might take a few bites before I realize what's happening. That's why I always ask about ingredients and carry my EpiPen." She nodded thoughtfully, writing everything down. "How interesting. And you're absolutely certain it's not just in your head?" The question caught me off guard. "I'm sorry?" "Oh, you know how the mind can play tricks. Sometimes when people expect to have a reaction, they convince themselves they're having one even when they're not." David frowned. "Mom, that's not how allergies work. I'm just saying, psychosomatic reactions are very real too. I've seen it with children. They get so worked up about something that they make themselves sick." I felt heat rising in my cheeks, but I kept my voice calm. "Lorraine, I understand your skepticism, but this is a documented medical condition. I have an allergist, I carry medication, and I've been hospitalized multiple times. This isn't anxiety or attention-seeking." She held up her hands in mock surrender. "Of course, dear. I'm just an old teacher. What do I know about anything?" The conversation left me unsettled, but David assured me his mother was just being cautious. "She probably wants to make sure she doesn't accidentally hurt you," he said. In her mind, she's being responsible by asking all these questions. As the wedding approached, I found myself both excited and anxious. Everything was falling into place beautifully. The venue was perfect, my dress fit like a dream, and David and I were more in love than ever. But something about Lorraine's behavior continued to nag at me. She'd become almost obsessively interested in the food preparation, insisting on handling everything herself and refusing offers of help from other family members. "I want everything to be perfect for my son's wedding," she'd say whenever anyone questioned her taking on so much work. "This is my gift to them." The morning of our wedding dawned crisp and clear, exactly the kind of October day I'd dreamed of. I woke up in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by my bridesmaids, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. My allergies were the furthest thing from my mind as we got ready, laughing and crying happy tears as my mom helped me into my dress. The ceremony itself was absolutely magical. David looked impossibly handsome in his navy suit, and when he saw me walking down the aisle, tears started streaming down his face. Lorraine was in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, and for a moment I thought maybe she was finally warming up to me. Maybe becoming family would change everything between us. After the ceremony, we moved to the reception hall for cocktails and dinner. Lorraine had outdone herself with the appetizers, beautiful displays of canapés, fruit arrangements, and several elaborate salads. She seemed genuinely happy for the first time since I'd known her, bustling around the food table and accepting compliments from guests about her cooking. "Amelia, dear," she called out as I mingled with our guests, "you simply must try the special salad I made. It's my grandmother's recipe, and I made it especially for you." She guided me over to a beautiful glass bowl filled with what looked like a gourmet autumn salad, mixed greens, dried cranberries, goat cheese, and what appeared to be toasted breadcrumbs on top. It looked absolutely delicious, and I was touched that she'd made something specifically for me. "This is so thoughtful, Lorraine. Thank you." She beamed at me, and for a moment I saw what David must have seen in her. A caring mother who wanted the best for her family. "I put a lot of love into it. I really hope you enjoy every bite." I took a generous forkful, savoring the combination of flavors. The dressing was tangy and sweet, the cheese was creamy, and there was a lovely crunch from what I assumed were seasoned breadcrumbs. I took another bite, then another, chatting with guests and feeling completely relaxed and happy. It wasn't until I was halfway through my portion that I started to feel the familiar tingling in my mouth that meant something was very, very wrong. At first I thought maybe I was imagining it. The tingling sensation was subtle, and I was so caught up in the joy of the day that my brain didn't want to process what was happening. But within minutes the tingling became unmistakable, and my lips started to feel swollen. "David," I called out, trying to keep my voice calm even as panic started to set in. "David, I need my purse. I think I'm having a reaction." He was at my side instantly, his face shifting from confusion to alarm as he saw the hives already starting to appear on my neck. "What did you eat?" "The salad," I gasped, my throat beginning to feel tight. "Lorraine's salad." David rushed to get my EpiPen while I tried to stay calm and breathe, but my throat was closing rapidly and I could feel my airway becoming more restricted by the second. Around us, wedding guests were starting to notice that something was wrong. My bridesmaids surrounded me, and someone called 911. Through the chaos, I saw Lorraine pushing through the crowd, her face a picture of shock and concern. "Oh my goodness, what's happening? Is she okay?" "She's having an allergic reaction," David said tersely, helping me use my EpiPen. "Call an ambulance." "But how is that possible?" Lorraine's voice was high and distressed. "I was so careful. I made sure there were no nuts in anything." The EpiPen helped, but not enough. My breathing was still labored, and angry red hives were spreading across my arms and chest. The paramedics arrived within minutes, and I was loaded onto a stretcher still wearing my wedding dress, David clutching my hand as we rushed to the hospital. The emergency room was a blur of medical equipment and urgent voices. The doctors pumped me full of antihistamines and steroids, monitoring my breathing and blood pressure. It took several hours before I was stable enough to think clearly, and by then our wedding reception was long over. The doctor confirmed it was definitely a walnut reaction, David told me, his face pale with exhaustion and worry. Apparently there were finely ground walnuts mixed into the breadcrumb topping on that salad. I felt sick to my stomach, and not just from the medication. But I told her so many times about my allergy. We went over it in detail. "I know, baby." She feels terrible about it. She's been pacing the waiting room for hours, crying and apologizing to anyone who'll listen. When I was finally released the next morning, Lorraine was indeed waiting in the hallway, looking haggard and devastated. She rushed over to me the moment she saw me, tears streaming down her face. "Amelia, oh my dear girl, I am so sorry. I don't know how this happened. I was so careful about checking all the ingredients. There must have been cross-contamination somewhere, or maybe I grabbed the wrong container. I would never ever intentionally hurt you. You have to believe me." Looking at her tear-stained face, I did believe her. Despite our rocky relationship, I couldn't imagine anyone being evil enough to deliberately poison someone at their own wedding. It had to have been a horrible, tragic accident. "I know you didn't mean for this to happen," I said, my voice still hoarse from the trauma my throat had endured. "These things can happen even when people are being careful." She hugged me tightly, and I could feel her whole body shaking with sobs. "I'm just so grateful you're okay. I don't know what I would have done if something terrible had happened to you. David would never have forgiven me, and I would never have forgiven myself." For the next few days, Lorraine was the picture of a remorseful mother-in-law. She sent flowers, called to check on me, and even offered to pay all my medical bills. I started to think that maybe this terrible experience might actually bring us closer together. Maybe she finally understood how serious my condition was, and maybe the fear of almost losing me had made her realize she cared about me more than she'd admitted. David and I spent the next week recovering from the trauma and disappointment of our ruined wedding. We'd planned to leave for our honeymoon the day after the reception, but obviously that was cancelled. Instead, we spent quiet days at home, processing what had happened, and talking about maybe having a small ceremony later to make up for the disaster. It was exactly 1 week after the wedding that my entire world shifted on its axis. I was checking my emails, responding to concerned messages from friends and family, when I received a text from Sarah, David's cousin who lived across the country. Sarah and I had always gotten along well during family gatherings, and she'd been devastated to miss our wedding due to a work commitment. "Hey Amelia," her text read. "I hope you're feeling better. I have something I need to show you, but I'm not sure how to handle it. Can you call me when you have privacy?" Something about her tone made my stomach clench with anxiety. I called her immediately. "Sarah, what's going on?" Her voice was tight with stress. "Amelia, I've been debating whether to tell you this for days. I keep going back and forth, but I think you have a right to know." "Know what?" "I got a message from my mom yesterday. She was at your wedding, and afterwards she was in a group chat with some of the other relatives, including Aunt Lorraine. Someone was asking about what happened to you, and... Well, my mom screenshot something that Lorraine said because she thought it was weird. She sent it to me because she didn't know what to make of it." My heart was pounding. "What did she say?" "I'm going to send you the screenshot. But Amelia, you need to prepare yourself. This is really bad." My phone buzzed with an incoming image, and when I opened it, I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. The screenshot showed a group text conversation. Lorraine's contact name was clearly visible, and there, in black and white, were messages that made my blood run cold. "I still don't believe that girl is really allergic to nuts," Lorraine had written. "She's always so dramatic about everything. If she was truly allergic, wouldn't she have had a reaction before now? I think she just likes being the center of attention." Another message, sent just a few minutes later. "I'm going to find out once and for all if this allergy thing is real, or if she's just being a prima donna. If she's really allergic, she'll react immediately. If she's faking it, nothing will happen and we'll all know what kind of person we're dealing with." And then, the message that made my hands shake so violently I almost dropped my phone. "I'm adding finely ground walnuts to her salad tomorrow. Just a small amount, mixed into the breadcrumb topping. She won't be able to taste them until it's too late. If she's really allergic, we'll know right away. If she's not, then we'll finally have proof that she's been lying to get attention." I couldn't breathe. I literally could not get air into my lungs as I stared at the evidence of what Lorraine had done. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't cross-contamination or grabbing the wrong container. This was deliberate, calculated, malicious poisoning. My mother-in-law had tried to kill me to prove a point. "Amelia, are you there?" Sarah's voice seemed to come from very far away. She did it on purpose," I whispered. "I'm so sorry. I know this is devastating, but you needed to know. We couldn't let her get away with this." I hung up and immediately called David, but my voice was shaking so badly he could barely understand me. He rushed home from work to find me sitting on our couch, staring at my phone screen, completely catatonic with shock. What's wrong? You're scaring me. I wordlessly handed him my phone. I watched his face as he read the messages, saw the exact moment when the full horror of what his mother had done hit him. His face went white, then red, then white again. This can't be real, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Someone must have faked this. Someone's trying to cause trouble. Call Sarah, I said quietly. Ask her to send you the original screenshot from her mother. Ask her mother who else was in that group chat. This is real, David. For the next hour, David made phone calls while I sat in stunned silence. Sarah's mother confirmed everything. 2 other relatives had screenshots of the same conversation. Lorraine had deleted the messages from the group chat shortly after sending them, but not before multiple people had seen them and taken screenshots. When David finally got off the phone, he looked like he'd aged 10 years. He sat down next to me and buried his face in his hands. She really did it, he said, his voice muffled. My mother deliberately poisoned you at our wedding. The words hung in the air between us, too monstrous to fully comprehend. The woman who had raised David, who had spent 30 years teaching elementary school children, who presented herself as a pillar of the community, had tried to kill her son's wife to prove a point about attention-seeking. What do we do now? I asked. David was quiet for a long time. When he finally looked up, there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before, a cold, hard anger that reminded me that he was, after all, his mother's son. We confront her, he said. Tonight. Lorraine answered her door with a bright smile that faltered the moment she saw our faces. David, Amelia, what a lovely surprise. Come in, come in. I just made some tea. We're not staying long, Mom, David said, his voice deadly calm. We just need to ask you about something. She led us into her pristine living room, the same room where she'd grilled me about my allergies just months before. Everything was exactly as it always was. Doilies on every surface, family photos arranged just so, the faint smell of lavender potpourri in the air. It was the picture of respectable suburban normalcy, which made what we were about to discuss even more surreal. What's on your minds? Lorraine asked, settling into her favorite armchair and smoothing her skirt. You both look so serious. David pulled out his phone and showed her the screenshot. We need you to explain this. I watched her face carefully as she read the messages. She went through several expressions: confusion, recognition, panic, and then something that looked almost like relief. I don't know what this is, she said, but her voice was shaky. Someone must have hacked my phone or something. Mom, David's voice was dangerously quiet. Don't lie to me. We have confirmation from 3 different people who were in that group chat. We have timestamps. We have evidence. Lorraine looked from David to me and back again, and I could see her calculating her options. Finally, her shoulders sagged and the mask slipped away. I was just frustrated, she said, her voice small. You have to understand, David. This girl comes into our family and suddenly everything revolves around her special dietary needs. No nuts, no this, no that. It's exhausting. And she's so dramatic about everything. So you decided to poison her to prove she was lying? David's voice was getting louder. I didn't think it would actually hurt her. I thought if she was really allergic, she'd feel a little sick and we'd get her to a doctor. If she wasn't, then we'd know she was making it all up for attention. Mom, you could have killed her. But I didn't. She's fine. She recovered. I found my voice for the first time since we'd arrived. I spent 8 hours in the emergency room. My throat closed up so severely that I couldn't breathe. I could have died if the paramedics hadn't gotten there in time. Lorraine looked at me with something that might have been remorse, but her next words showed it was anything but. Well, at least now we know you weren't lying about the allergy. The casual cruelty of that statement hit me like a physical blow. Even now, even faced with the evidence of what she'd done, she was more concerned about being proven wrong than about nearly killing me. David stood up so abruptly that his chair rocked backward. Get out, he said to his mother. What? Get out of my life. You are never to contact me again. You are never to contact my wife again. If you try to reach out to us in any way, I will file a restraining order and I will press charges for attempted murder. Lorraine's face crumpled. David, please. I'm your mother. I made a mistake, but... You didn't make a mistake, Mom. You made a deliberate choice to potentially kill the woman I love because you didn't like her. That's not a mistake. That's who you are. We left her crying in her living room, begging us not to abandon her. But the damage was done, and not just to our relationship. Within days, the story had spread through the entire extended family. Sarah's mother had been so horrified by what she'd learned that she'd told other relatives, and soon everyone knew what Lorraine had done. The fallout was swift and devastating for her. She was quietly asked to resign from her volunteer position at the church. Neighbors who had known her for decades began crossing the street to avoid her. The principal of the elementary school where she'd taught for 25 years called to say they were removing her from their substitute teacher list. Lorraine tried desperately to do damage control, calling family members to explain her side of the story, but the screenshots spoke for themselves. There was no way to spin. I deliberately fed my daughter-in-law walnuts to see if she was faking her allergy into anything resembling acceptable behavior. David and I spent hours talking with a lawyer about whether to press criminal charges. The evidence was clear that Lorraine had committed assault with intent to cause bodily harm. But ultimately, we decided that the complete destruction of her reputation and relationships was punishment enough. She would have to live with what she'd done for the rest of her life, knowing that everyone in her community knew exactly what kind of person she really was. We did, however, require her to write a formal letter of apology that we could share with anyone who asked about what had happened. In the letter, she had to admit exactly what she'd done and take full responsibility for her actions. It was humiliating for her, but necessary for our peace of mind. 6 months after our disastrous wedding, David and I had a small ceremony in my parents' backyard with just our immediate families and closest friends. This time, I prepared all the food myself, and we made sure that everyone who attended truly loved and supported us. Lorraine wasn't invited, obviously. In fact, she doesn't even know what happened. David changed his phone number and blocked her on all social media. As far as we're concerned, she no longer exists. The experience taught me something crucial about family and loyalty. Real family doesn't test your medical conditions to see if you're worthy of accommodation. Real family doesn't risk your life to prove a point about attention seeking. Real family protects you, supports you, and believes you when you tell them something important about your health. I learned that I don't owe anyone access to my life just because they're related to my husband. I learned that setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's necessary for survival. And I learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones most willing to hurt you to maintain their own sense of control. David struggled with guilt for months, wondering if he should have seen the signs of his mother's cruelty earlier. But I reminded him that none of us expect the people we love to be capable of attempted murder. Lorraine had hidden her true nature behind a facade of respectability for 61 years. There was no way he could have predicted what she was capable of. Now, 3 years later, we're expecting our first child. Sometimes I wonder if Lorraine knows she's going to be a grandmother, but then I remember that she gave up that right the day she decided my life was worth risking to satisfy her curiosity. My child will grow up surrounded by people who truly love and protect them, not people who see them as experiments to be tested. I still carry my EpiPen everywhere, and I'm still vigilant about reading ingredient labels. But now I'm also vigilant about the people I allow into my life. I've learned that the most dangerous threats don't always come from strangers. Sometimes they come from the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. The last I heard about Lorraine, she was living alone in the same house, estranged from most of her family and friends. She apparently tells people that David and I are ungrateful and cruel for cutting her out of our lives over one little mistake. But the people who matter know the truth, and they know that attempting to murder your daughter-in-law at her own wedding isn't a little mistake. It's a window into a soul that was rotten all along. I don't forgive her, and I never will. Some actions are unforgivable, and some people reveal themselves to be so fundamentally broken that redemption isn't possible. Lorraine made her choice when she ground up those walnuts and stirred them into my salad. She chose her pride over my life, her need to be right over my right to exist safely in her family. And I made my choice too. I chose to protect myself, my husband, and my future children from someone who had proven herself capable of anything. I chose to build a family based on love and respect, rather than manipulation and control. I chose to believe that I deserved better than being treated as a science experiment by the woman who was supposed to become my second mother. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not giving Lorraine a second chance, if I think cutting her off permanently was too harsh. But then I remember lying on that stretcher in my wedding dress, gasping for air, while David held my hand and cried. I remember the calculated malice in those text messages, the casual way she discussed potentially killing me to prove a point. And I know that some people don't deserve second chances. Some people reveal themselves to be so fundamentally dangerous that the only safe response is to run as far and as fast as you can. I'm running toward a future where my family is safe, loved, and protected. Lorraine can keep her apologies and her regrets. I have everything I need without her.